Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Further Review. We are Team No Sleep. Ryan O'Halloran, Jay Skurski, and adjacent hotels down here in Fort Lauderdale. We're a couple hours removed from Bills 31, Dolphins 10, a thorough win to move the Bills to 2-0. Bunch of topics to cover. Jay, let's start with Jamarcus Ingram. As you put in your story in today's Buffalo News, this is a guy who was on the inactive cusp for the Arizona game. Now he's making big plays. You know, what you sort of tell readers about Ingram and you know how good he was against Miami.
Yeah, well, let's first go back to the Arizona game, right? He makes the play at the end of the game to knock away that fourth down pass from Kyler Murray, kind of seal the victory in a much closer season opener than even what this game against Miami ended up being. And Ingram sort of picked up right where he left off against Tua and against the Dolphins on the first drive. He gets the interception, sort of right place, right time with the deflected ball. Christian Benford had good coverage, but Ingram makes the play, right? And you got to make the play. It's one thing to be in position, it's another to make the play, and he did that. Gives the Bills a good drive start. They're able to cash that in. It's 7-0, and they're on their way, right? And then in the third quarter, it's sort of the coup de grace. Another interception, bad decision by Tua to even throw the ball. Again, kind of Ingram's watching it come to him like, is this really happening? Brings it in, and this one he takes back to the house. And the thing that stood out to me, Ryan, was the pure joy of his teammates after he scored. I think every single guy on that team went up to him and gave him some love afterward, and they all respect his story. And you mentioned it there, right? This is a guy that was a rookie trial player, kind of similar to Joe Andreessen recently. Another guy that spent a year at UB, again, similar to Andreessen. And so it's a player with a local tie who has not had an easy way in the NFL. He spent most of his first 2 years on the practice squad. But even going back to former defensive backs coach John Butler, they love this kid. They love his toughness. They love his ability. And for him to earn a spot on the 53-man roster, get a jersey on game day, and then make the most of it is a really, I think, cool early season success story for the Bills.
It is, and you mentioned John Butler. It's a testament to him. It's a testament to his coaching staff, and also Jamarcus is you have to have the mindset of, even if I'm not playing, I still have to practice hard. I still have to work on my craft just in case my number's called. And if Taron Johnson doesn't injure his forearm against Arizona on the 7th play of the game, Ingram's not playing because Cam Lewis is your dime player. But you mentioned the guys rallying around Ingram after that touchdown. You're just seeing that in the locker room as well, because players recognize guys who battle. Mm-hmm. And if they thought somebody was a coaster and it sort of doesn't work hard, they give him a high five. But they, like you said, they seem genuinely excited, and it's right place, right time. Yes, on that first one, Tua, that was just the start of his night. I mean, the guy bounces off shoulder pads. Ingram makes the interception. They cash in on it. The second one, maybe one of the worst interceptions I've ever seen. I mean, that was a throwaway. AJ Epinesa had pressure, and it felt like the ball was in the air forever. But you got to catch it. You got to have your wits about you, and you got to score a touchdown. So, I think moving forward is, do you play more dime just to get Ingram on the field? That's going to be a matchup thing. They played a lot of base nickel last night, but what it shows you is that it gives them options. Right now in this Bill defense, they're running out of options. We'll get to that later, but obviously a good start for Ingram tonight.
Yeah, no question. And Ryan, it's no surprise that Josh Allen is going to be the focus pretty much after every podcast for us, for every fan. But this was a game, and I wrote in my report card that the Bills didn't need Josh Allen to be Superman. Only 19 passes, 130-odd passing yards. Sort of an odd statistical game, but the reason they didn't need Josh Allen to be Superman is a guy that you wrote about, James Cook. 3 touchdowns in the first half. What can you say about his night? What did you learn after the game in talking to Cook and some of his teammates?
Yeah, I mean, this was a 3-touchdown first half for James Cook, which ties a Bills franchise record for a first half. And funny thing, for to take readers inside this locker room, you'll hear people refer to him as James. You'll hear people refer to him as Jimbo. You'll hear people refer to him as Jimmy. So it's like almost you need your own little roster for all his nicknames. But, a little bit of like with Ingram is guys were aware last year that he had 237 carries, James Cook did. He had 2 rushing touchdowns because goal line was Josh Allen territory. But you have to show trust in your running back, and also, hey, this is you got to give your running back a little sugar, and that's one thing I talked to James about last week. I said they got to give you some goal line carries, and even Josh Allen said after the game, he goes, Jimbo was begging for some of that, so we gave it to him, and let's take these 3 touchdowns. The first one, that 4th down pass, as soon as that play is completed, you and I looked at each other and said that was one of the best Joe Brady calls we've seen in terms of just scheming it up, aggressiveness on 4th down. He was wide open in the left flat, scored untouched. The second one, 1-yard run, untouched again pretty much, so good blocking. And then really the 49-yarder that made it 24-7. The Dolphins were so out of whack defensively in that play. The Bills had a triple team. And I asked David Edwards about that, the left guard. I said that wasn't by design. He goes, no. He goes, that was supposed to be a double team, but guys had nobody to block because they were out of their gap. So, and then Connor McGovern blocked one guy, and then he just watched the rest. So, you add it all up. He had 11 carries for 78 yards, 7.1 average, and then he had 1 catch for 17 yards, which was a touchdown. That's pretty high efficiency. And to your point, Jay, is Josh Allen, that left hand was obviously bothering him because he was safe with his scrambles. He dropped that shotgun snap, maybe took his eye off it, but that could have played a part. And I think they went into this game saying, hey, let's go short passes to Kincaid, which they started off the game until he got kneed in the head. And then also let's ride that running game, 26 carries, which includes kneel down. So I think this is a positive step for James Cook because Joe Brady has to show trust in him, the kind of trust that Ken Dorsey didn't show in him last year at the goal line.
The thing I like, you kind of ran through those 3 touchdowns, and one thing in particular stood out to me on each of them. The first one, it's an easy catch, but we saw James Cook drop easy catches last year and drop touchdowns last year. He made that play. He finished that play, right? And so, awesome play design by Brady. But for James Cook, that's a step in the right direction. Hey, the play is there. Go make it. Then you get to the goal line carry, and you just broke it down. 2 rushing touchdowns all of last season, all of 2022. He matches that last night in the first half. I'm glad you brought up Allen's hand because I think, that was my first thought, right? He completes that pass to Ty Johnson. It's 1st and goal at the 1-yard line. Well, what do they do here? Because usually that's Josh Allen running territory, and you don't want to do that. And I think rewarding Cook, and rewarding is probably exactly the best word to use there, and then to see him walk it in, right? Obviously, he gets great blocking up front, but there's no question that's an easy touchdown. That's another really good sign for James Cook for this offense. And then what don't you love about the 49-yarder if you're a Bills fan? Because who is it that had the angle that he ran right past? Jordan Poyer, right? So, how fitting was that if you're a Bills fan? You're watching that. And that's the game-breaking type of speed that changes games. That if that's a 15-yard run, that's great. That's awesome. But a 49-yard touchdown run, that was sort of putting the foot on the throat of the Dolphins at that point in the game. And so for Cook to have that kind of night, what it meant to him, right? You saw him, he does the front flip into the end zone, which is sort of becoming his thing. Immediately gets up and he launches that ball into the stands. You could tell that he was really fired up, and I think even Sean McDermott said afterward that game meant a lot to James Cook. And listen, if they get him going like this, which he has been here through the first couple of weeks, that's only going to make Josh Allen's life easier.
Yeah, and to wrap up this running back thing is the less you see Allen running forward, the better. I thought Ray Davis has given them a spark in these first 2 games. Ty Johnson hasn't really been used, but he had that big catch on 3rd down. And, I think a healthy Josh Allen on that 3rd down play, the 33-yard pass to Johnson, I think a healthy Josh Allen probably would have tucked it and tried to scramble for yards, but he knew his limitations. So I think they have to be pleased with their running back play so far through 2 games. All right, Jay, injuries hit this Bills defense again on Thursday night, and this was a big one. Terrell Bernard, the defensive captain, linebacker, injured his left pectoral in the first half, did not return, replaced by Bale Inspector. Obviously, Matt Milano already out, replaced by Dorian Williams. They win the game. They're 2-0. They get a mini bye, but this is a big-time concern as we talk at 9:13 a.m. on Friday.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we will, learn a little bit more here in the next maybe day or two. We'll see if Sean McDermott speaks to the media, once they're back in Buffalo and settled and they've had a chance to go through the tape and all of that. But, you hear pectoral muscle, the immediate concern is tear, right? Mm-hmm. And if it is a tear, and again, speculative on our part at this point, that's a long-term injury, potentially season-ending. We saw Daquan Jones last year tear his pectoral muscle week 5 in London and make it back at the very end of the regular season. Again, this is probably a little bit premature because we've got to get official word, but it's not premature to talk about what Bernard means to this defense. I mean, as you mentioned there, Ryan, voted a team captain, one of only 2 with Josh Allen. That tells you a lot about the respect that he has in the locker room. I mean, the guy came out of really almost nowhere last season to not only step in for Tremaine Edmonds after he departed in free agency, but in many ways exceed Tremaine Edmonds' level of play. I mean, the amount of big plays that Bernard made, it seemed to be week in and week out. 6.5 sacks, the interceptions, the forced fumbles or fumble recoveries. He just found his way around the football, and this is a supreme challenge. And when you add it into, as you already said, missing Matt Milano, your linebacker depth chart right now, you're looking at Dorian Williams, a 3rd-round pick, and then is it Balen Spector? Does he hold on to the job? Does Nicholas Morrow, a veteran, maybe work his way in? Do we even get to Joe Hendriesen, right, the pride of Lancaster High School, who kind of won over everybody in the preseason? He's been inactive the first couple of games. I would fully expect that to change if Bernard misses some time here, which certainly looks like a possibility. You hate it for the player, of course. You never like to see anybody get hurt. One thing that stood out to me, and I'm going to add Taron Johnson in here. I know we're kind of focused only on the linebackers, but when you talk about the injuries throughout the defense right now, I was talking with Marcel Louis-Jacques from ESPN. He used to cover the Bills, now covers the Dolphins for ESPN last night after the game, and he was laughing, saying, I didn't even know who Jamarcus Ingram was. He said, it seems like when the Bills have an injury on defense, they find a way to get better. And I think that's a really feather in the cap of the coaching staff right now, right? That they've got these guys that can come in, and Balen Spector is playing 3+ quarters, next to Dorian Williams. That's not Matt Milano and Terrell Bernard. And the Miami Dolphins, the high-powered offense of the Dolphins, is held to 10 points. Again, long-term, it's going to be a challenge. It's going to be a concern. But I think at least last night, in sort of that narrow frame, you have to give the coaching staff a lot of credit to have Balen Spector ready. And now, as you mentioned, they've got this mini bye where at least they can come up with a plan if Bernard misses time to say, this is how we're going to best defend moving forward. Maybe it's, as you said earlier in the podcast, maybe it's a little bit more dime defense where you're not relying on as many linebackers. We'll see moving forward.
Yeah, and both Spector and Williams both had 10 tackles on Thursday night, and you saw Dorian. I mean, Dorian's one of those guys, he's always going to go 100 miles an hour, but it looked like he was a little bit more in control last night, not flying. I mean, you want your linebackers to fly around, but not just recklessly, and he seemed like he did that pretty well. And you mentioned Nicholas Morrow, and maybe this is a big deal, maybe this is no deal, but that during the garbage time, it was him and Spector on the field, and Morrow had the green dot. So are they getting him ready to, maybe handle those duties? Because, Balen Spector, his problem has been staying available.
Yeah.
And, let's see, I think he probably did enough to get a chance against Jacksonville alongside Dorian, but it's something to be monitored because Andreessen, he'll get a jersey because he needs to play special teams. But if you're Brandon Beane this weekend, you're sort of thinking, okay, veterans who's out there who can really step in quickly. So a win, but more injury concerns for the Bills.
Yeah, I think if you're going the veteran route, it probably does make sense to give Morrow the first opportunity. I mean, that's what you brought him here for, right? Was for that veteran depth, and that's an astute observation, Ryan, to notice the green dot there at the end. Because listen, that was Bernard's job, right? And so maybe to your point, they're getting Morrow ready for that. Let's not forget that Morrow missed a big portion of the summer as well with a groin sort of core muscle injury too. So it's potentially they're kind of getting him back up to speed physically now with 10 days before their next game. They've got some time to do that. But yeah, obviously a situation we'll be monitoring going forward. All right, Ryan, so we sit here in Fort Lauderdale on a Friday morning with the Bills 2-0. You think back to where we were at halftime of the season opener against the Arizona Cardinals and how things have changed, right? Because now this team gets some time to rest, get some time to maybe heal up some bumps and bruises that had accumulated in those first 2 weeks, and it's got to be feeling really, really good about where it is this early in the 2024 season.
They do, and nationally today, I would guess the story is going to be more about the Dolphins than about the Bills because of the Tua injury. And just want to hit on that really quick. Damar Hamlin, and I want to tee you up because you talked to Damar after the game. Tua just showed no awareness on that play, and I don't want to criticize a guy who was injured trying to make a play, but that was a fourth down play. He had the first down clearly. And even they said it, Kirk Herbstreit said it on the broadcast. They said, you got to slide, and it looked like, it's, it was sort of a bang play. And, the Dolphins, Tua was having a terrible game even before that. Now he's injured. But just real quick, Jay, what did Damar have to say about that play after the game?
Yeah, I tweeted it during the game, and I'm glad you did bring it up. For our further review print product, I'm actually going to write a little bit more about Damar Hamlin and, what went through his mind in that play, because it was eerily reminiscent, at least in my mind, of the play that sent Damar Hamlin into cardiac arrest in Cincinnati. It was a shot to his chest. You have to look at the replay again to see whether the contact from Tua hit the shoulder or more. It looked to me like it was, again, in the chest for Damar Hamlin. And for him to be involved in a play like that, what a scary reminder of what this sport is, what the violence that's in this sport, right? Because obviously what happens to Tua is the concern, and to your point, nationally, that I think is probably going to be the most talked about thing coming out of this game. But we got to remember who was on the other side of that hit too. And Damar Hamlin, I thought, had some interesting thoughts about that. So make sure that you read about that in the further review on the print side. But yeah, again, going forward, Ryan, now you're looking at 2-0. You've got a long layoff here before Jacksonville on a Monday night back at home. When you looked at the first 5 or 6 games on this Bills schedule, I think everyone agreed it was a challenge. And so to bank 2 wins this quickly is big for this franchise.
It is, and division road game. They continue their dominance on Miami, and they play Jacksonville next, and Jaguars have had their number. I mean, last year in London, that was the beginning of the end for Ken Dorsey. And then a couple years ago, that was one of Urban Meyer's only wins as Jaguars coach. So take care of business on a Monday night because you got 3 in a row on the road after that. And they're tough putts in golf terms. At Baltimore, at Houston in the Diggs Bowl, and then at the Jets, and that's been a house of horrors for the Bills the last couple of years. So a positive step. And yeah, I wanted to bring up one thing that you tweeted out after the game. They had 1 penalty for 5 yards last night, and this was after they had 4 false start penalties on the same drive against Arizona. So I looked it up, and you said, hey, probably the most disciplined McDermott team. Well, it was. That was the fewest penalties of his era and the fewest penalty yards of his era, so that's a positive as well. But the other, trying to think of their other takeaways here. They're spreading the ball around, as usual. I'll ask you about Kincaid. After that first pass, we both said, hey, this is a course correction after he only had 1 catch. You think they're saving some things for him in their hip pocket for when they need it with him?
I think it's possible. I mean, the way that game started, to go 2 out of 3 of the first plays go to Kincaid for 17 yards, and we're looking at each other going, yeah, this is the Kincaid game, right? But as Allen pointed out in his post-game press conference, it's going to look like a weird game statistically just because of where their drive starts were after the turnovers, and then, quite frankly, what they did or didn't need to do once it's 31-10. I mean, at that point, they're just in run-the-clock-out mode, so it's a lot of carries. The wide receiver numbers, the Kincaid numbers aren't looking particularly good through 2 weeks, but 34 and 31 points, the end result is what matters. And so I think it's been a slow statistical start, kind of a weird statistical start in some ways. But as Josh Allen said, the only statistic that matters is 2-0 on the scoreboard, and that's where the Bills are right now. And so listen, we've got 2 Sundays in a row here where Bills fans kind of get to sit back, watch the rest of the league, and see how things unfold around the Bills, knowing that their team is off to the start that it was looking for. So Ryan, you get to enjoy a weekend. I get to enjoy a weekend. We're looking forward to that. And we'll, of course, be back after the Monday night game against the Jaguars in Week 3. Leading up to that, though, we'll have a ton of stuff in the print product of the Buffalo News basically every day covering the Bills. So for Ryan, I am Jay. This is the second edition of Further Review. Thanks so much for watching.